This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com. This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
The following is for mature audiences only. So if you aren't cool with dark, disturbing, and depraved, you might want to keep it moving.
Welcome to 10-Minute Murder.
Life didn't exactly deal Keith Jesperson the best hand. Growing up in the 1950s Washington, he had two options: be the shy, awkward kid everyone picked on, or become the violent monster his father actually would applaud. Guess which route he took? By age 5, Keith already discovered his favorite extracurricular activity, killing animals, and his dad was practically handing him gold stars for it. Fast forward a few decades, and Keith's twisted need for control wasn't limited to stray pets anymore. With a truck driving job that gave him access to the open road and no shortage of opportunities, he left a trail of devastation that stretched across the country. But here's where things get really messy. Wrongful convictions, bathroom stall confessions, and a calling card that was, let's just say, unconventional. Today we're diving into how Keith Jesperson went from being bullied to one of America's most notorious serial killers. But before we get into that story, if you like your true crime brief and bingeable, you have found the right podcast. Tap the follow button now for access to at least 2 episodes per week. And now, let's get into it. In the 1950s, Selah, Washington wasn't just a small, picturesque town. It was a battleground for young Keith Jesperson. Towering over his peers and burdened with a quiet, shy demeanor, Keith was caught in between two versions of himself: the boy he was and the boy his father, Les Jesperson, demanded he be. Les had a firm philosophy that raising boys, strength defined their worth. If that strength didn't come naturally, it would be instilled forcefully. Instead of protecting his son from bullies, Les turned his rage inward, punishing Keith for being a victim. A belt was his weapon of choice, wielded publicly for maximum humiliation. On one occasion, Les went even further, administering an electric shock as punishment. This wasn't discipline. It was brutality, masquerading as fatherhood. But Les wasn't entirely stingy with his approval. He saved it for one thing: violence. When Keith, at the tender age of 5, began torturing animals, birds, stray pets, anything he could catch, Les rewarded him with pride. For Keith, this twisted encouragement unlocked something dark inside of him: The act of killing gave him a sense of control, a fleeting balm for the chaos his father created. The violence became intoxicating, and as Keith's young mind tried to make sense of the world, he began to ask himself a horrifying question. If killing an animal feels good, what would it feel like to kill a person? At just 5 years old, Keith Jesperson was already teetering on the edge of darkness, his warped upbringing ensuring he wouldn't be able to step back. By the time Keith was 10, his life already read like a primer for dysfunction. One of his few friends, Martin, seemed more like a frenemy, often getting the pair into trouble and then masterfully pinning the blame squarely on Keith. In most households, this might have earned a stern lecture, but in the Jesperson family, it meant beatings, public ones. Les Jesperson was nothing if not consistent in his cruelty, and Martin got a front row seat. One day, when Martin was once again shifting the blame onto Keith, something inside Keith snapped, confronting his friend the only way he'd ever been taught, through violence. Keith attacked. While it may have looked like a typical playground fight between two 10-year-olds, Keith later admitted that he wasn't just trying to hurt Martin, he was trying to kill him. Though Martin survived, Keith walked away with something chilling, an appetite. This marked the first deliberate attempt to take a human life, and while it was unsuccessful, it left him wanting more. A year later, that hunger resurfaced. Keith was swimming with another so-called friend, a boy who, like the others in his orbit, couldn't resist bullying him. As Keith swam, the boy ambushed him, forcing his head underwater until Keith passed out. Though Keith obviously survived, the incident cemented his need for revenge. Weeks later, at a local pool, Keith returned the favor. Sneaking up on his friend, he held the boy's head underwater with brutal determination. It took lifeguards to separate them, but by then, the intent was clear. Keith wanted him dead. That attempt, like the first, ended in failure. Keith still didn't know what it truly felt like to kill another person, but he was no less determined. For now, though, he kept those dark urges to himself. As Keith grew older, life seemed to follow a more conventional path. On the surface, anyway. He graduated from high school, met Rose Huckle, and by the age of 20, he was married with 3 children. The young family settled into a quaint farmhouse that bordered an apple orchard. Keith took a job as a truck driver, providing for his family and putting on the facade of a normal, hardworking father. But lurking beneath the surface was a man shaped by violence, revenge, and an unrelenting thirst for control. What seemed like a fresh start was merely a pause in the storm. On the surface, the Jesperson's family farmhouse, bordered by an apple orchard, seemed like the perfect place to raise children, with fresh air, open space, and plenty of wildlife. It was a slice of rural Americana, but the reality of life inside those walls was far from idyllic. Melissa Jesperson, Keith's eldest daughter, would later share a chilling memory from her childhood. One day, while playing in the cellar, she discovered a litter of stray kittens. Thrilled by her find, like any young girl would be, she brought them outside, eager to play with her new furry friends. But her joy quickly turned to horror when Keith spotted the kittens and saw them as an opportunity to relive an early childhood cruelty. Without hesitation, he grabbed the kittens, hanging them from the clothesline as if they were laundry. Melissa could only watch in terror as the helpless animals clawed and screamed, struggling to free themselves. Her pleas for mercy went unanswered, met instead with Keith's laughter. Desperate, she ran to get her mother, Rose, but by the time Rose arrived, the kittens were dead, their tiny bodies discarded on the ground. Keith's twisted sense of amusement had run its course. Rose was horrified, but like so many times before, she chose to stay silent. She had 3 children to protect, and for now, that meant keeping the family together. But Keith's sadism wasn't the only crack in their marriage. When strange women began calling the house asking for Keith, Rose knew he was having affairs. She waited for him to leave on one of his long-haul trucking jobs, packed up the kids, and drove 200 miles to her parents' home in Spokane, Washington. The marriage was over, but for Keith, it was barely a hiccup. By 35, he was divorced, unburdened by family ties, and free to indulge his darkest impulses on the open road. In 1990, Keith's newfound freedom came at a steep cost for 23-year-old Tanya Bennett. While on a trucking job in Portland, Oregon, Keith met Tanya at a bar. He invited her back to his rental, where an argument erupted. Fueled by his deeply ingrained tendency to solve conflict with violence, Keith attacked Tanya, killing her in the process. Using his knowledge of highways and back roads, he disposed of her body and any evidence linking him to the crime. But while Keith had escaped detection, the investigation into Tanya's murder took an unexpected turn. Laverne Pavlinac, trapped in an abusive relationship, saw the case as her way out. She fabricated a story claiming her boyfriend, John Sanowski, had killed Tanya and forced her to help. She even provided details she'd read in the news to make her tale more convincing. Her plan backfired spectacularly. John was sentenced to life in prison, and Laverne received a 10-year sentence. Despite her later admissions that she had lied, the damage was done. Meanwhile, Keith couldn't believe his luck. Not only had he avoided suspicion, but 2 innocent people were taking the fall for his crime. For a while, Keith reveled in his anonymity, but his father's shadow still loomed large in his mind. If no one knew he was responsible for the murders, where was the recognition, the validation? To satisfy this craving, Keith began leaving confessions in truck stop bathroom stalls. When those didn't get the attention he wanted, he escalated, sending letters to newspapers and police departments. Each one was signed with a smiley face, earning him the moniker, the Happy Face Killer. But his desperate attempts to claim credit didn't bring law enforcement any closer to catching him. Instead, Keith remained free and ready to kill again. Keith Jesperson's second known victim was a woman he identified only as Claudia, found near Blythe, California, in the summer of 1992. She had been raped and strangled. Shortly after, he murdered Cynthia Lynn Rose in Turlock, California, claiming she'd trespassed into his truck while he slept. Then came Lori Ann Pentland, a woman from Salem, Oregon, who was brutally killed after allegedly trying to double her fee for her services. In 1993, Patricia Skipple's body was discovered. Initially ruled as an overdose, it was later revealed to be yet another of Keith's victims. And in 2023, DNA testing finally identified his last known victims, Suzanne L. Kellenberg, a woman he murdered decades earlier in Crestview, Florida. In 1995, Keith Jesperson's reign of terror came to an end with the murder of Julie Winningham, his girlfriend at the time. During initial police interviews, Keith clung to his father's lessons, staying stoic and refusing to answer any questions. The police had no choice but to let him go. But his composure cracked in the weeks that followed. He felt the pressure mounting and made multiple failed attempts to take his own life. Finally, he turned himself in. Over the course of his confession, Keith admitted to killing over 160 people, though authorities could only confirm 8. Among those was Tanya Bennett, whose murder had initially landed on Laverne Pavlinac and her allegedly abusive boyfriend John in prison. Keith provided details only the killer would know, including the location of Tanya's purse, leading to their release. Keith Jesperson was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. From his idyllic farmhouse beginnings to his gruesome cross-country crimes, Keith's story is a grim reminder of how unchecked violence can ripple outward, leaving a destruction in its wake. That's 10-Minute Murder for today. Brief and bingeable true crime. I'm Joe, the host. Thank you for listening. And if you're a brand new listener, hit subscribe right now. And that felt a little aggressive. My bad if that came across as pretty strong worded. Please, can I throw a please in there if that helps? Hit subscribe right now, please. And also follow on all social media places. I'm trying to ramp up my TikTok visibility. I'm trying to do that at the moment. Trying to get, but it could get canceled again, so who even knows if that's a waste of time if I'm spinning my wheels. But if you've got a TikTok, go follow 10-Minute Murder and 10-Minute Mystery on those. I'm trying to level up my TikTok game with both podcasts. You can also send me an email, joe@10minutemurder.com, if you want to get in touch with me to suggest cases or just to ask me any random questions like this one. Hi, Mr. 10-Minute Murder, Joe the host. What scares you? WRB in OKC. Now, I chose to take this as a genuine question. It feels like a threat. so I'll answer it like it is a genuine question. Hopefully it's not a threat. Let me tell you, because I just went on like a mini road trip yesterday. I'll tell you what scares me, and that's drivers of Nissan Altimas. Y'all just don't care anything about anyone else on the road. It feels like you just don't want to be safely driving in a lane without swerving in and out, stomping on your brakes, and then you're riding people's rear ends. I don't understand. And it's almost always Nissan Altimas that I see that, like, if you get a little too close to me in traffic, I'm like, oh, I'm over here. I don't want to honk the horn because that feels rude, but also don't hit me. And it's always a Nissan Altima that does that to me. And I don't know why. I didn't do anything to you guys. Take it easy on me. So that scares me. Nissan Altimas. I'm automatically got my spidey senses up when I see you in traffic. But, other than that, snakes and clowns, those scare me. Heights. Yeah, I forgot about heights. Again, back to driving. If the overpass is too high, if it's more than like 2 stories of a building, that's too high. I get a little bit freaked out. I can still drive it, but it scares me. I hope that answers your question, WRB and OKC, and I hope that wasn't some type of veiled threat. I will turn that over to my lawyer just in case. And that's going to do it. That is your episode for today. Thank you so much for listening to 10 Minute Murder.
This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. When you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself, talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.